If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free, and they give you creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more platforms. It's everything you'll ever need to make a podcast, all in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Sharing Life Lessons with a very special guest. I am your host, Hamidah, and I want to bring you stories. I want to bring you stories from around the world and from anyone who wants to share their life lesson with us in this podcast series. I also want to inform my listeners that prior to this, I have published an episode 000. In that episode, I have told you a bit about myself and also discussed the genesis of the creation for this podcast series. So I encourage you to listen to episode 000 just to be better connected with your host. I would like to start this episode by reading excerpts from a particular book. But before I do that, I want to tell you why I chose that book. How many of you believe in signs and signals from the universe? I am a strong believer in it, and I actually sometimes ask the universe to give me signs when I am not sure or I have a doubt about some decision that I'm making. And I believe in it because the universe has sent me several signs in the past, especially when I needed them the most. I believe that this book is one such sign from the universe. I started reading this book in summer of 2019, and I remember enjoying it, but then suddenly just losing it. I looked for it everywhere and I couldn't find it. And because I had lost it, I just picked up another book and started reading that book. In the meantime, I decided to create this podcast and I started recording for it. But all along, I requested for validation from the universe because what I haven't told you thus far is that professionally, I am an independent financial executive. And for over a decade, I have worked in big global banks in a risk management and regulatory relations capacity. So, this for me is totally uncharted territory. And therefore, you can see why I would need validation. After I recorded a couple of episodes, my daughter came back home for her winter break and she gave me this book and she said, Mommy, when you came to drop me off to school in September, you forgot this book in my dorm room. And I go, aha, that is where I lost my book. The title of the book is Kitchen Table Wisdom, Stories That Heal by Naomi Remen. And what Rachel says in the first 50 pages of this book is exactly the thought process that I went through for which I decided to create this podcast. I sincerely hope that you will believe with me that there was no better sign from the universe that I was meant to create this podcast and that I should continue doing so. Naomi Remen said in this book, stories are the language of community. Stories are not replicable because our lives are unique. Our uniqueness is what gives us value and meaning. Yet, in the telling of stories, we also learn what makes us similar, what connects us all, what helps us transcend the isolation that separates us from each other and from ourselves. A deep trust of life often emerges when you listen to other people's stories. You realize you're not alone, you're traveling in wonderful company. Without further ado, I want to introduce you to our very first guest, Pat. Pat is a loving daughter, wife, mother, and a dear, dear friend. Pat recently chose to retire from being the Global Head of Diversity and Inclusion at JP Morgan Chase. She has been my lifeline on many occasions, both professionally and personally. Pat is a wise and strong woman, and it is an honor to have her as the opening guest of this podcast.
Hamidah, thank you for that warm welcome, and I am honored to be your first guest, and I also want to wish you a very happy birthday. So, Hamidah, I'm responding to your question, what is a life lesson I learned that I want to share? Now, I remember when I was in high school and we had career day, and one of the speakers said the best advice she can pass on to us as high school students was to make sure we had a plan. Now, at the time she said this, it seemed like a lot of work and not something that would help me in any way. Have a plan? I was a teenager in high school, and I thought, really? I just want to graduate and get a job. I'll work on a plan after I get my career going. Well, let me tell you, looking back, that was probably the best advice I've received. It was practical, but was almost so simple, it didn't make enough sense for me to take action and do anything about it. What this person was actually saying was have a plan for life. Not a detailed day-by-day plan, but some goals you want to achieve over a certain period of time. Get into the habit of setting personal, professional, financial, and spiritual goals for yourself. So now, every New Year's Eve and every April 15th, I ask myself 4 questions. This personal self-assessment doesn't take a long time and helps me develop some actions. Am I satisfied with what I've done? And if not, what am I prepared to promise to myself to do about it? Am I physically where I want to be? Am I spiritually where I want to be? Am I socially where I want to be? And am I financially where I want to be? All of these are things that I can control. We all hear our parents say, you put yourself there, so get yourself out of it if you don't like it. Which is true. We are the byproduct of all the decisions we've made, like it or not. And oftentimes our decisions are without thought of the future impact, and we are on this daily lazy Susan of life where things happen and time just passes by. And before you know it, you're older, and maybe many of the decisions that you made put you in a place where when you look back at your life, it's not where you want to be. So it's time to be more deliberate of your future.
Very well, Pat. I like how you have divided your entire life into 4 major aspects: physical, financial, social, and spiritual. And I heard you say that we should know where we want to be in these 4 aspects of life. And then we need to evaluate to see if we are where we want to be. The question is, if you evaluate and you realize that you are not where you want to be, then what do you do?
So I make a promise to myself. If I'm not physically where I want to be, I quickly think of what am I going to do about it? I'm going to drink 8 glasses of water a day and make sure I walk 10,000 steps. To help me, I bought the Fitbit and that Spark water bottle. If I'm not spiritually where I want to be, I quickly think of what am I going to do about it? I'm going to go to church every Sunday at 8:30 in the morning and also join as a volunteer in the church. Now, if I'm not socially where I want to be, I quickly think of what am I going to do about it? I'm going to reach out to my friends and keep in touch with them quarterly and also invite them to my house twice a year. And if I'm not financially where I want to be, I quickly think of what am I going to do about it? I will automatically save X number of dollars a month and also cancel my magazine subscription. So the advice of have a plan was probably the most valuable advice I've received that I want to pass on to you, and I still keep as part of my own rhythm and routine. It's simple, easy to do, and doesn't cost any money. So good luck on having and actioning your plan, and remember to keep the promises you make to yourself.
Thank you, Pat, for not only sharing with us when and how you learned your life lesson, but also describing to us how you are utilizing it in your own life to date. So listeners, our lesson number 1 is have a plan and, more importantly, be accountable to yourselves. This message can help us in all aspects of our lives, in school, in college, at work, and in our personal lives. One of my favorite poets is Kabir. Kabir was a 15th century Indian mystic poet, and his famous writings are in the form of dohas or couplets. I can't help but remember one of his dohas in which he shares the same message. It goes as follows: Karta tha so kyun kiya, ab kari kyun pachtaye, boya ped babul ka, tu aam kahan se paaye. Which means, without thought did you act, now done, why repent post the act? You sowed a seed of an acacia plant, how can you expect it to reap for you mangoes for a fact? What we have heard from Pat today and likewise from Kabir may or may not resonate with you. Some may think this is exactly what I needed to hear at this point in my life, and others may think, but I prefer going with the flow and making decisions on the fly. What do you think? Please leave comments below or write to me at sharinglifelessons101@gmail.com. Listeners, if you have enjoyed listening to this episode, then please rate, review, and subscribe. Our next episode will be next Wednesday. Until then, be happy and be well.